First class isn't for people like you. Move or I'll call security." The white flight attendant said it loud enough for everyone to hear, making sure all the wealthy passengers knew she was protecting them from this black man in casual clothes who obviously couldn't afford to be there. Who must be using a fake ticket or stolen corporate code because black people don't belong in luxury spaces reserved for people with money, with class, with white skin, that meant their presence was never questioned. She had just warmly welcomed 5 white passengers in sweatpants without a single question. But this black man, she grabbed his boarding pass like stolen property, demanded his ID. His employment verification asked humiliating questions. She'd never asked anyone white, treating him like a criminal in front of dozens of witnesses. The black man had experienced this 44 times in his life. Hotels, restaurants, stores, always the same. Black people don't belong in luxury spaces. But 30 minutes later, something worse happened. The black man noticed a critical safety issue, a malfunctioning emergency exit door. He tried to report it. The same flight attendant dismissed him again because she'd already decided his black voice didn't matter. That's when he made one phone call that grounded 14 aircraft, stranded 7 to 250 passengers, and exposed a 65% failure rate that would have killed everyone on board. They humiliated a black man at the gate. They had no idea that one call would shut down the entire airport and change aviation forever. The fluorescent lights of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport burned with sterile intensity at 6:15 a.m. on a Friday in late autumn. Despite the early hour, the terminal hummed with controlled chaos. The smell of burnt coffee mingled with jet fuel shoes, squeaking on polished floors, rolling luggage clattering past gate after gate, automated announcements echoing off high ceilings. Somewhere a child cried. A child. Someone shouted into a phone about a missed connection. This was the machine, the system, and it ran on rules, written and unwritten. In commercial aviation, an invisible hierarchy existed as rigid as any caste system. First-class passengers were treated like royalty. Their comfort anticipated, their requests fulfilled instantly, their presence acknowledged with deference. Business class received professional courtesy. Premium economy got a nod. And regular economy, they were cargo that happened to breathe necessary for revenue, but not particularly valued beyond their ticket price. Flight attendants and gate agents were trained sometimes explicitly, more often implicitly, to identify who belonged where. Not just by checking tickets, but by reading signals, expensive luggage, designer watches, confident postures, tailored clothing, the invisible uniform of wealth. And if you didn't send those signals, if you looked wrong for first class, you got extra scrutiny, extra questions, extra doubt. The early morning sun struggled to penetrate the massive windows, creating patches of golden light amid the artificial brightness. Business travelers moved with practiced efficiency, weaving through slower-moving families and confused first-time flyers. The constant beeping of carts, chiming of phones, and rustling of bags created a sound tapestry that regular travelers learned to tune out like city dwellers, ignoring sirens. Gate areas filled with slumped figures, hunched over phones, faces illuminated by blue light shoulders, curved around overpriced coffees. Boarding announcements punctuated the drone, triggering Pavlovian responses, people rising, gathering bags, forming lines that often made no logical sense. The unspoken choreography of air travel played out according to rules that everyone seemed to know but no one had formally learned. James Reynolds understood this system intimately. He'd lived inside it for decades. At 52 years old, James stood exactly 6 feet tall with a solid, healthy build. His skin was deep brown, his hair cut close with distinguished silver at the temples. His face was handsome in an understated way. Strong jawline, thoughtful eyes that absorbed everything while revealing little, a mouth that smiled rarely but genuinely. This morning he wore clothes deliberately chosen to blend in. A simple navy polo shirt from a department store 3-pack, well-worn Levi's 501s, faded at the knees. white New Balance sneakers with one fraying shoelace and a scuff on the right toe. He carried a 7-year-old REI backpack fraying at one corner with a broken front zipper. No Toomey briefcase, no Rimowa luggage, no Rolex, just a $35 Casio watch from Target. To any observer, James looked like a high school teacher on vacation, maybe an IT consultant heading to a regional conference. Certainly not someone who belonged in first class. But that was exactly the point. James had money. Significant money. The kind that could buy private jets drivers all the protective cushioning that insulated wealthy people from ordinary indignities. But he'd learned something important over 25 years building his fortune. You only see the truth of a system when you experience it without the protective cushion of obvious wealth. When people knew who you were, they showed their best behavior. When they didn't, they revealed their true values, their real assumptions, their actual priorities. James wasn't just a passenger. He was a member of Sky Blue Airline's board of directors holding a 35% equity stake. He was CEO of Horizon Investment Group, managing a $4.8 billion aviation portfolio. He'd built his fortune from nothing, son of a mechanic and a nurse in South Atlanta, full scholarship to Georgia Tech MBA from Wharton, first job at an investment firm where he'd worked 18-hour days, started his own firm at 30 with 2 clients in a one-room office. Now, at 52, he was worth approximately $420 million. But nothing in his appearance revealed that. 2 years ago, James had proposed ground truth auditing to the Sky Blue board. Executives flying commercially unannounced to experience what customers actually experienced. Not sanitized site visits where everyone knew the boss was coming, but raw reality. He'd flown 23 times in 18 months, sometimes first class, sometimes economy. He'd seen excellent service and terrible service. He'd met flight attendants who genuinely cared and others who were burned out and bitter. But he'd never experienced anything like what was about to happen. 200 feet away at Gate D23, Catherine Walsh was preparing for flight SK2801 to San Francisco. As lead flight attendant, she'd been with Sky Blue for 15 years, long enough to develop strong instincts about passengers. Catherine was 38 years old. She'd started flying right out of college, wide-eyed and idealistic about the glamour of air travel. That idealism had been ground down by reality, by drunk passengers, entitled executives, screaming children, the physical toll of the job, eroded pay through bankruptcies, nights in cheap crew hotels. But she still took pride in her work. Every morning, Catherine was impeccably groomed, navy blazer with polished gold buttons, crisp white blouse professionally laundered, navy pencil skirt hitting exactly at her knee, hair in a tight French twist, subtle perfect makeup, name badge gleaming Catherine Walsh, lead flight attendant, 15 years of service. She took pride in maintaining standards, a phrase she used often, standards for uniforms, standards for service, standards for who belonged in first class and who didn't. That last one had become complicated 5 years ago. She still remembered the incident with perfect clarity. A Tuesday evening flight to Phoenix. A man had boarded first class wearing baggy jeans and a stained hoodie carrying a torn duffel bag. No expensive luggage, no status markers, nervous and awkward. Catherine had assumed he'd gotten an upgrade. Someone who didn't belong might cause problems. She'd been right. 40 minutes in, he'd gotten violently drunk, harassed other passengers, particularly a young woman refused to stop despite warnings. They'd made an emergency landing in Albuquerque. Police removed him in zip ties. 3-hour delay. Formal complaint filed. After landing in Phoenix, Catherine's supervisor had pulled her aside. "You let him on the plane. You saw him. You should have known there would be problems." But his ticket was valid. "It's not about the ticket, Catherine. It's about judgment, about reading people. You should have flagged him. That's why we pay you to use your instincts." The write-up went into her file. It delayed her promotion by 2 years, costing her $15,000. It was mentioned in every review for 3 years. It became a black mark she had to overcome. The lesson she learned: trust your instincts. If someone doesn't look like they belong in first class, you're probably right. Better to question and be wrong than let someone through and be sorry. Better too careful than not careful enough. Since then, Catherine's instincts had become more suspicious, more focused on appearance and markers that distinguished real first-class passengers from imposters. Some might call it profiling. Catherine called it experience. She stood at gate D23 now, tablet glowing with the passenger manifest. 28 first-class seats, 26 booked. Good load factor. She scanned names cross-referencing with memory. Michael Bennett, regular passenger. Pleasant. Preferred sparkling water. Jennifer Hayes, status flyer. Always professional. Tipped well. David Richardson. She'd had him before. Polite. Straightforward. Then James Reynolds, seat 2A. Corporate account HZ4187. No frequent flyer status. No VIP designation. No history. She made a mental note. Watch that one. James Reynolds sat in the terminal, appearing to anyone watching like just another business traveler checking email before boarding. In reality, he was reviewing quarterly operational metrics for Sky Blue Airline's data that only a handful of people at the company ever saw. Load factors, revenue per seat mile, on-time performance, safety incident reports. This wasn't just another flight for James. This was ground truth auditing in action, experiencing the airline without the protective bubble of status and recognition. The project had begun after a board meeting 2 years earlier. The CEO had presented glowing customer satisfaction scores, claiming Sky Blue was leading the industry in passenger experience. "These numbers look impressive," James had said, "but they don't match what I'm hearing from actual customers." The CEO had dismissed his concerns. "Our survey methodology is industry standard. These are statistically valid results." That night, James had dinner with his father, still working as a mechanic at 76 because he couldn't afford full retirement. "How's the airline business?" his father asked. "According to our reports, everything's perfect." His father laughed. "Your reports are worthless. You want to know how an airline's really doing? Fly it. Economy class. Dressed normal. Sit in the back. See how they treat you when they don't know you're worth millions." That conversation sparked the ground truth auditing program. Most executives resisted. "We have mystery shoppers for that." But James persisted, and eventually the board approved the initiative. Over 18 months, James had flown Sky Blue and competitors, sometimes in economy, sometimes in premium cabins, always dressed like an ordinary person, always observing. He'd documented everything good and bad. Some crews were exceptional, creating warmth and dignity for everyone, regardless of cabin. Others revealed troubling patterns of bias and indifference. But the ground truth auditing wasn't just about customer service. It was about safety culture. How an organization treated its least powerful customers often reflected deeper patterns in how it handled dissenting voices, inconvenient information, and safety concerns. James had experienced discrimination 44 times before in his life. Questioned at hotels, restaurants, country clubs, stores. Each time he'd made a choice fight or let it go. Each time the calculation was different. But a question had been growing louder in his mind. At what point does silence become complicity? At what point does letting it slide mean you're accepting that this is just how the world works? One incident stood out in his memory. 6 years earlier at the Grandview Hotel in Chicago. He'd arrived late after a board meeting, dressed casually, carrying his old backpack. "The service entrance is around back," the clerk had said without looking up. "I'm a guest." The clerk's eyes had widened slightly. "Are you sure you have the right hotel rooms here? Start at $600 a night." James had silently placed his platinum card on the counter. "Oh, I apologize, sir. Let me check your reservation." James had let it pass. He was tired. He had an early meeting, but that night, staring at the ceiling of his $800 room, he couldn't sleep. Not because of the insult he'd grown a thick skin against those, but because of a realization. If he, with all his resources and power, still faced these indignities and often chose to let them go, what happened to people without his advantages? What happened when the James Reynoldses of the world stayed silent instead of using their position to demand change? That night in Chicago was when ground truth auditing began to take shape in his mind. Not as a customer service initiative, but as something more fundamental. A way to see and document the reality of how systems treated people, especially when those people didn't arrive wrapped in the protective packaging of obvious wealth and status. Catherine Walsh considered herself a professional above all else. Her uniform was always perfect. Blazer, pressed shoes, polished, not a hair out of place. She prided herself on consistency, on never letting personal problems affect her work performance. She'd joined Sky Blue straight out of college, drawn by the promise of travel and glamour. The reality had been more complicated. The job was physically demanding, standing for hours, lifting heavy bags, dealing with pressurized cabins that dried out skin and aggravated sinuses. The schedule was punishing early mornings, overnight flights, constant jet lag, holidays away from family. The glamour had faded quickly, but Catherine had persevered. She'd risen from junior attendant to lead through determination and attention to detail. She knew the safety procedures cold. She memorized frequent flyers' preferences. She followed protocols meticulously. 5 years ago had come the incident that changed her career trajectory. Flight 1242 to Phoenix, Tuesday evening. Catherine had just welcomed passengers aboard, scanning faces' luggage behaviors, the instinctive assessment flight attendants develop. One passenger in first class had immediately triggered her concern. A man in his 30s, wearing baggy jeans, hanging low, a stained hoodie, untied sneakers, carrying a torn duffel bag that had seen better days. He'd shown a valid first-class ticket. Probably an upgrade, Catherine had thought. She'd seated him, noting his nervousness, how out of place he seemed among the business travelers in their pressed shirts and polished shoes. 40 minutes after takeoff, the problems began. The man had consumed 3 vodka drinks in rapid succession. His voice grew louder. He began making inappropriate comments to a young woman seated across the aisle. When Catherine asked him to moderate his behavior, he'd become belligerent. "I paid for this seat. I can do what I want." The situation escalated. The captain made an emergency landing in Albuquerque. Police came aboard. The man was removed fighting against zip ties. The flight was delayed 3 hours while paperwork was completed. A formal complaint was filed. Back in Phoenix, Catherine's supervisor had called her into a small office at the crew base. "You let him on the plane," the supervisor said, report open on her desk. "You saw him when he boarded. You should have known there would be problems." But his ticket was valid. Catherine had protested. He had a confirmed first-class seat. "It's not about the ticket, Catherine. It's about judgment. About reading people. You should have flagged him for additional screening. You should have notified the captain about potential issues. That's why we pay you to use your instincts. So I'm supposed to discriminate based on how someone dresses." The supervisor's eyes had narrowed. "We're not talking about discrimination. We're talking about risk assessment. You saw someone who clearly didn't fit the normal profile for first class. You should have been on higher alert." The incident went into Catherine's file. It was mentioned in every performance review for the next 3 years. Her promotion to purser was delayed by 2 years, costing her approximately $15,000 in lost wages. The message was clear: better to be too cautious than not cautious enough. Since then, Catherine had developed a heightened vigilance about passengers who didn't look right for their cabin class. She'd learned to watch for signals, luggage, quality clothing, brands, jewelry, posture, speech patterns. She'd prevented several potential incidents by identifying passengers who might cause problems and taking preemptive action, extra attention, limited alcohol service. Subtle warnings. Some might call it profiling. Catherine called it professional judgment. The airline rewarded her for it, even if no one said so explicitly. Elena Rodriguez sat in the gate area reading a worn paperback romance novel. At 68, the retired elementary school teacher was heading to San Francisco to meet her new granddaughter for the first time. She wore a purple cardigan over black slacks and comfortable flats. Her silver hair was cut short for easy maintenance. She carried a small purse containing essentials, wallet tissues, reading glasses, hard candies. Elena was flying economy middle seat, but she didn't mind. After teaching third graders for 40 years in the Atlanta public school system, she could handle discomfort with grace. She'd arrived early, as was her habit. Better to sit and read than rush and worry. From her seat, she had a perfect view of the gate desk and the growing line of passengers. Elena had been Hispanic in America for 68 years, grown up in Texas during segregation, lived through the civil rights movement, spent 4 decades teaching children to be better than the generations before them. She'd developed a sixth sense for discrimination, the ability to see when someone was being treated differently because of their appearance. Elena's own father had been denied service at restaurants despite being a decorated World War II veteran. Her brother had been pulled over while driving their family's new car, accused of stealing it. Her husband, before he passed, had been followed in stores, asked to show receipts when white shoppers walked out unchallenged. Even her students' innocent children had sometimes come to class in tears after being told they didn't belong somewhere because of their skin color or accent. These experiences had forged in Elena a quiet determination to witness injustice and name it when she saw it. She had taught her students that silence in the face of wrong was a form of participation. Now retired, she carried that principle with her everywhere. She noticed the flight attendant watching a black man in casual clothes, and she recognized instantly the particular quality of that attention. The suspicion, the assessment, the prejudgment. Elena had seen it thousands of times, sometimes directed at herself, more often at her husband before he passed, and too frequently at her students and their parents. She marked her place in her book and watched her teacher's instinct for trouble brewing as strong as ever. Across the gate area, Michael Bennett checked his watch, an Omega that had cost $8,000. The 50-year-old investment banker was a weekly sky blue flyer accumulating over 100,000 miles annually. He wore Tom Ford suits, carried Toomey luggage, stayed in luxury hotels, and expected premium service as his due. He'd never questioned the hierarchy of air travel. He belonged in first class, others didn't. The system worked as it should. Michael's journey to wealth had been smooth, and privileged private schools, legacy admission to an Ivy League university, an entry-level position arranged by a family friend, rapid advancement aided by connections and mentorship. He'd worked hard, certainly, but the path had been cleared for him in ways he rarely acknowledged, even to himself. His world was populated by people like himself, wealthy, well-connected, accustomed to deference. When he traveled, hotel staff remembered his name and preferences. Restaurant hosts found tables at fully booked establishments. Flight attendants anticipated his needs. This wasn't special treatment in his mind, just how the world operated for people who mattered. Michael noticed the black man in casual clothes sitting quietly typing on a laptop. A fleeting thought crossed his mind. Wonder if he's in the right gate before he dismissed it. Not his concern. He returned his attention to his phone, reviewing market reports before boarding. Near the jet bridge entrance, Daniela Morales arranged welcome drinks for first-class passengers. At 27, the junior flight attendant had been with Sky Blue for 3 years. She took pride in her work and the crisp lines of her uniform and knowing regular passengers' preferences. Born to immigrant parents who had cleaned office buildings at night, Daniela had worked her way through community college before earning her wings. She noticed everything but said little, learning to navigate the complex social dynamics of the cabin crew world. Daniela had observed Catherine's growing preoccupation with passenger profiling over the past year. She'd seen how her senior colleagues scrutinized certain passengers more heavily than others, how she made assumptions based on appearance, how she sometimes created friction where none needed to exist. But Daniela kept her concerns to herself. Catherine was her superior, and the aviation hierarchy was clear. Those with seniority set the tone. Those without followed. In the operations center, 2 floors below, Robert Cooper monitored terminal activity across dozens of screens. The 38-year-old airport operations manager, ex-Air Force, was responsible for keeping Terminal D running smoothly. With hundreds of flights, thousands of passengers, and countless potential problems each day, Robert focused on efficiency and protocol. He didn't want drama. He wanted on-time departures, clean facilities, and minimal complaints. Every disruption meant paperwork. Every delay meant performance metrics suffered. 10 miles away at Sky Blue corporate headquarters, Laura Taylor was already at her desk despite the early hour. The 45-year-old executive vice president had responsibility for customer experience operations and corporate communications. She'd risen through the ranks over 20 years, starting as a marketing coordinator and working her way up through determination, strategic thinking, and political savvy. She knew every aspect of the airline business, from route planning to crew scheduling to corporate partnerships. Laura also knew James Reynolds, though not as well as she would have liked. As a board member with a substantial equity stake, he had significant influence over company direction and executive careers. His ground truth auditing initiative had made many in leadership uncomfortable. Some viewed it as unnecessary meddling. Others worried it would expose problems better left unacknowledged. Laura had supported the program, at least publicly. Privately, she worried about what James might discover and how it would affect the company and her career. In his office at the Federal Aviation Administration Regional Headquarters, Richard Moore reviewed safety reports with his morning coffee. The 52-year-old FAA administrator had responsibility for oversight of all commercial aviation operations in the southeastern United States. A former pilot with an engineering background, Richard took his job seriously. Aviation safety wasn't just professional for him, it was personal. His father had died in a preventable crash caused by maintenance negligence. Richard had met James Reynolds several times at industry events. He respected the investor's knowledge of aviation and his commitment to safety culture. Unlike many financial people who saw airlines merely as balance sheets and cash flow projections, James understood that safety and operations were inseparable from financial performance. None of these people, Elena, Michael, Daniela, Robert, Laura, Richard, knew that their lives were about to intersect in ways that would change an industry. All because of how one man in casual clothes would be treated at gate D23. We're now boarding first class and priority passengers for flight SK2801 to San Francisco. First class and priority passengers welcome aboard. The announcement triggered the usual response. People who weren't in first class began standing anyway, positioning themselves near the gate desk, creating a crowd that served no real purpose. Zone 3 passengers hovering near the Zone 1 boarding area, as if physical proximity would somehow get them on the plane faster. James shouldered his backpack and got in line. He positioned himself behind 4 other first-class passengers waiting patiently without checking his phone or fidgeting. In front of him, Michael Bennett with his Rimowa clicking on the floor. A woman in her 60s wearing expensive jewelry and carrying a Louis Vuitton bag. A man in his 40s in a business suit with a Toomey briefcase. A younger woman in business attire typing on her phone even as she shuffled forward. One by one, they approached the gate desk, where Eric Johnson, a 26-year-old gate agent who'd been with Sky Blue for 3 years, scanned boarding passes with practiced efficiency. Michael Bennett stepped up. Beep. Green light on the scanner. "Have a great flight, Mr. Bennett. Thank you for your business." The woman with jewelry. Beep. Green light. "Welcome aboard, ma'am. Enjoy your flight to San Francisco." The man in the suit. Beep. Green light. "Thank you, sir. Have a wonderful flight." The younger woman. Beep. Green light. "Safe travels today." Then James stepped forward. He smiled at Eric, a genuine smile that acknowledged shared humanity, and handed over his boarding pass. It was printed paper, not mobile. Some security experts recommended paper because it couldn't be remotely hacked. James just liked having a physical backup. Eric scanned it without hesitation. Beep. Green light. The screen showed Reynolds James. Seat ZO2A first class. Eric looked up, made eye contact, smiled warmly. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Have a wonderful flight this morning. Weather looks perfect all the way to California. Thanks. I appreciate that. James took his boarding pass back and walked toward the jet bridge, that accordion tunnel connecting terminal to aircraft. This was the moment when everything could have gone differently. If Catherine had been distracted, if she'd been in the break room, if she'd made different choices 5 years ago, if any of 1,000 variables had been slightly different. But she was standing right there at the entrance to the jet bridge, tablet in hand, glowing with the passenger manifest. She'd positioned herself strategically, an unofficial secondary screening she conducted on flights when she had time. Not in any manual, not part of official procedure, but something she felt was her responsibility as lead flight attendant. She saw James approaching, saw the plain polo shirt, the worn backpack, the scuffed sneakers, the cheap watch, his casual walk. His face a black man in his 50s, who didn't look like he belonged in first class. And she made a decision. She stepped directly into his path, blocking the jet bridge entrance completely. Not just inserting herself for a quick question, she physically positioned herself as a barrier. "Excuse me, sir." Her voice was cold professional, but with an edge of authority. "I need to see your boarding pass." James stopped. There was something in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, of weariness, of here we go again. But his face remained neutral. Of course, his voice was even polite, showing no irritation. He pulled the boarding pass from his pocket and handed it over. Catherine took it, examined it with theatrical intensity. She looked at the pass, then at James's face, then back at the pass, then at her tablet, then back at the pass. Her eyes narrowed. She held it up to the light as if checking for forgery. James Reynolds, Seat 2A, First Class Sky Blue Airlines Flight SK2801. Everything was legitimate. Everything was in order. The pass had been scanned 20 seconds ago by Eric right in front of her. But something in Catherine's mind whispered, "This doesn't look right." Mr. Reynolds. She pronounced his name slowly, carefully, as if testing whether it was real. "This boarding pass shows Seat 2A first class. Is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am. That's my assigned seat. And you purchased this ticket yourself." "It was purchased through my company's corporate account." Catherine's eyebrows rose slightly. "Corporate account." She made it sound suspicious. "Which company? I don't see how that's relevant to my boarding." "Sir, I'm asking a simple question. Which company purchased this ticket behind James?" Other passengers were beginning to pile up. They had to squeeze past this strange tableau, a flight attendant apparently interrogating a passenger before he could even enter the aircraft. A few showed annoyance at the delay. Others looked curious. Some seemed uncomfortable, sensing something wrong about this interaction. Michael Bennett walked by his Rimowa, clicking on the jet bridge floor. He had to navigate around Catherine and James. His eyes met James's for half a second. There was something in that glance, a flash of recognition that something wasn't right here. But Michael said nothing, just kept walking. Not his problem, not his business. "May I also see your ID, please?" Catherine's voice had shifted from questioning to demanding. James didn't argue, didn't protest, didn't ask why she was asking him questions. She hadn't asked the 6 white passengers who'd boarded before him. He simply reached for his wallet, pulled out his Georgia driver's license, and handed it to her. His movements were deliberate, calm, the movements of someone who'd been through this before. Catherine examined the ID with the same theatrical intensity. James Charles Reynolds, born April 15, 1973. Height 6'0". Weight 180 kilograms. Address 2849 Piedmont Road, Atlanta, Georgia, 30305. That was actually a good neighborhood, she noted. Buckhead area. The photo matched. The name matched. Everything was legitimate. But she didn't step aside. She pulled out her phone and stepped a few feet away, but her voice was still audible to James and the growing crowd of passengers trying to board. "Hi, this is Catherine Walsh, lead flight attendant on flight SK2801. I need to verify a first-class passenger. James Reynolds. Reynolds, seat 2A, corporate account code, HZ4187. Yes, I'll hold." James stood there, backpack in hand, watching passengers stream past him with curious or uncomfortable glances. He checked his watch. 7:46 a.m. They were supposed to depart at 8 Horu. This delay was eating into their departure buffer. From the gate area, Elena Rodriguez had stood up from her seat. She'd been watching this entire exchange from the beginning. She walked closer, not right up to the jet bridge. She hadn't been called for her zone yet, but close enough to hear, close enough to be a witness. She recognized what she was seeing. She'd seen it thousands of times in her 68 years. 30 seconds, 45, 1 minute. Catherine's phone conversation continued. "Yes. Uh-huh. Purchased when 3 weeks ago. Through which corporate account? HZ4187. And when was it booked 3 weeks in advance? Any flags on this passenger? Any notes? No. What about the payment method? Corporate credit card. And that's verified. Okay. All right. Thank you." She hung up and walked back to James. Her expression hadn't changed. Still suspicious, still guarded, still certain something wasn't right, even though every verification had come back clean. "Mr. Reynolds, your ticket was purchased through a corporate account. I need you to verify your employment." James looked at her steadily. "Why, it's standard procedure for corporate account verifications." "Is it?" James gestured subtly toward the jet bridge where Michael Bennett and 5 other passengers had walked through without any questions. "Did you verify employment for any of them?" Catherine's jaw tightened. "Sir, each passenger is assessed on a case-by-case basis." "Based on what criteria?" "Based on my professional judgment as lead flight attendant. And your professional judgment requires you to verify my employment but not theirs. Can you explain what specific factors about my ticket or my appearance prompted this different treatment?" The question was calm, almost academic, as if James were genuinely curious about airline procedures rather than pointing out obvious discrimination. Catherine felt trapped. She couldn't say what she was thinking, that he didn't look like someone who belonged in first class, that something about him seemed off, that her instincts were screaming he was an upgraded passenger who might cause problems. So she fell back on authority. "Sir, I have the discretion to request additional verification from any passenger. If you're unwilling to provide the information I'm requesting, I cannot allow you to board this aircraft." James's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're saying you won't let me board?" "Not until you've answered my questions to my satisfaction. I've shown you my valid boarding pass. I've shown you my valid ID that matches the boarding pass. Your own ticketing system has verified the purchase. What additional verification could you possibly need? Corporate account purchases require employment verification. That's policy. Then show me that policy in writing." Catherine's face flushed. "Sir, I don't have time to—" "Because I don't believe that policy exists. I believe you're making up reasons to deny me boarding because of how I look." Several passengers had stopped now, no longer pretending not to watch. This was becoming a scene. The crowd backing up into the gate area, people craning their necks to see what was happening. From the gate area, Elena Rodriguez's voice rang out strong and clear. "Let that man board. His ticket is valid. We all saw it get scanned. This is discrimination, plain and simple." Catherine spun around. "Ma'am, please do not interfere with crew operations. I'm not interfering. I'm bearing witness. I'm watching you harass a black passenger in ways you didn't harass a single white passenger." "That's not crew operations. That's racial profiling." A murmur ran through the growing crowd, people shifting uncomfortably, some nodding in agreement with Elena, others looking away, not wanting to get involved. A few pulling out phones, starting to record. Have you ever witnessed discrimination in travel? Has anyone ever questioned your right to be somewhere because of how you looked? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story matters. Catherine felt control slipping. She pulled out her radio, her voice tight. Gate D23 to operations. I need a supervisor at Gate D23 for a boarding issue. Possible security concern. Please respond immediately. Static then. Copy that. Manager en route. ETA 2 minutes. James remained where he was standing calmly just outside the jet bridge entrance. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't made any aggressive moves. Just stood there, a black man with a valid ticket being denied boarding while everyone watched. He checked his watch again. 7:49 a.m. 11 minutes late on boarding now. Inside the aircraft, Daniela Morales heard the commotion at the door. She stepped out of the galley and saw Catherine on her radio, saw a black passenger standing to the side, saw the growing crowd in the gate area, saw phones being raised to record. She walked forward quietly. Catherine, is everything okay? Catherine's voice was sharp, stressed. I'm handling it, Daniela. But his boarding pass was scanned right. The gate agent cleared him. Yes, but I'm exercising my discretion as lead flight attendant. Daniela glanced at James, then back at Catherine. She wanted to say something, wanted to point out that this didn't look right, that Catherine was creating a problem where none existed, that they were behind schedule, and this was making it worse. But Catherine was her superior. Catherine had 15 years of experience. Daniela had been flying for 3 years. So she swallowed her objections. Okay, let me know if you need anything. She retreated back into the aircraft, the weight of her own silence already beginning to press on her conscience. At 7:51 a.m., Robert Cooper arrived. The airport operations manager was out of breath from jogging through the terminal after getting the radio call about a security concern. He took in the scene immediately. Catherine standing guard at the jet bridge entrance. James standing calmly to the side, boarding pass and ID in hand. A crowd of at least 50 people in the gate area watching. Several phones recording. This was a PR nightmare in the making. What's the situation? His voice was professional, but tight. Catherine launched into her explanation. This passenger presented a first-class boarding pass, but there were irregularities that required additional verification. Corporate account code that didn't match standard vendor lists, vague responses about his employment, suspicious behavior during questioning. I determined, stop. Robert held up his hand. He turned to James. Sir, may I see your boarding pass and ID? James handed them over without a word. Robert examined both. Everything matched. He pulled out his tablet, called up the reservation. Corporate account, HZ 4187 Horizon Investment Group. Ticket purchased 3 weeks in advance, paid in full. No flags, no issues, no security concerns, nothing irregular at all. He looked at Catherine, his expression hardening. What specific irregularity did you identify? The corporate account code HZ 4187 is a valid corporate account in good standing. It's been used to purchase hundreds of tickets with us over the past 5 years. What made you flag this particular transaction? Catherine hesitated. It was a judgment call based on my experience. Based on what aspect of your experience? Be specific. The passenger didn't present the typical profile for first-class travel. No luxury luggage, no status markers, dressed casually. So you profiled him based on his appearance. I assessed potential risk based on observable factors. You profiled him. A black man in casual clothes who you decided didn't look right for first class. Robert's voice was cold now, cutting through Catherine's carefully crafted justifications. I was being cautious. Did you question any white passengers boarding first class this morning? Silence. Did you? No. But did any of them dress casually? Jeans and t-shirts? Sweatpants? Catherine's face went pale. She'd greeted at least 3 white passengers in casual attire without a single question. Robert turned to James. "Mr. Reynolds, I apologize on behalf of Sky Blue Airlines. You have a valid ticket. You have valid identification. There is no legitimate reason for this delay. You're cleared to board immediately." Catherine's voice rose in protest. "I have discretion as lead flight attendant to refuse boarding if I believe there's a security concern." Robert cut her off, his voice like ice. "What security concern? Articulate the specific concrete security concern you've identified beyond this passenger's appearance." His evasive answers during my questioning. Evasive. He asked you to explain why you were treating him differently than white passengers. That's not evasion. That's calling out discrimination. James spoke quietly, his voice measured but firm. "Actually, before I board, I need something clarified. Is Ms. Walsh formally denying me boarding to first class?" Robert looked surprised. "No, you're cleared," James interrupted gently. "I'm asking her. Ms. Walsh, are you exercising your authority as lead flight attendant to deny me boarding to the first-class cabin on this aircraft?" Catherine felt every eye on her. Robert's cold stare, James's calm gaze, 50 passengers watching, multiple phones recording. She was trapped. If she said yes, she was explicitly denying a valid passenger based on what was obviously discrimination. If she said no, she was admitting she'd wasted 15 minutes on theater and intimidation. But her pride wouldn't let her back down completely. "I am recommending alternative accommodations. We have availability in economy where you could be reseated while we complete our verification process." "That's a denial." James's voice was still calm. "You're denying me the seat I purchased that I have a valid ticket for and offering me a worse alternative that I didn't pay for. That's a denial of service. It's a temporary accommodation." "No. Answer yes or no. Are you denying me boarding to first class seat 2A? The seconds stretched. Catherine looked at Robert, hoping he'd give her an out, but his expression was stone. Finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am exercising my discretion to deny you boarding to first class, pending further verification." "Thank you for clarifying that." James pulled out his phone. Catherine's hand moved toward him. "Sir, you cannot—" "Don't touch me." James's voice was quiet but absolutely firm. "Step back." Robert immediately moved between them. "Catherine, step away now." James was already dialing. The phone rang twice, then a woman's voice. "James, is everything all right?" James spoke clearly, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Laura, I need you to conference in Robert Cooper from Atlanta Airport Operations and Richard Moore from the FAA immediately. I've been formally denied first-class boarding on flight SK-2801 despite having valid documents. The lead flight attendant has explicitly refused to allow me to board." Every head in first class turned. Michael Bennett's mouth fell open. Catherine looked like she might faint. Robert's eyes widened in recognition. "Laura, FAA." Laura Taylor's voice came through the phone, sharp with concern. "What?" "Who denied you, James? Are you? Hold on. I'm getting Robert and the FAA now." Clicking sounds hold music for 10 seconds that felt like an eternity. Catherine stood frozen, watching this ordinary-looking passenger who apparently had the executive vice president of Sky Blue Airlines on speed dial. A new voice joined authoritative Robert Cooper here. "What's the situation, Robert? I'm standing at gate D23 right now. Mr. Cooper should be right next to me." The Robert Cooper at the gate looked at his phone in confusion. Then understanding dawned. "Wait, you're calling about yourself. You're James Reynolds?" James gave him a tired smile. "Yes, Robert. I'm James Reynolds' Sky Blue board member, and I've just been denied first-class boarding by one of your lead flight attendants." The color drained from Robert's face. He'd just been standing next to a board member, the board member who held 35% equity in the airline, while that board member was being racially profiled and denied service. A third voice joined the call. "This is Richard Moore, FAA Regional Administrator. Someone want to tell me what's going on?" Laura's voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Richard James Reynolds, Sky Blue board member, has been denied boarding to a first-class seat he has a valid ticket for. Apparently, one of our flight attendants has decided that a black man in casual clothes doesn't belong in first class." Jesus Christ. Moore's voice was a mixture of exasperation and professional concern. "Put the flight attendant on the line now." Robert looked at Catherine, his expression a mixture of fury and something close to pity. "Catherine, the FAA Regional Administrator wants to speak with you." Catherine's hands shook as Robert held out his phone. She took it, her voice barely audible. "This is Catherine Walsh." Richard Moore's voice was crisp, professional federal. "Ms. Walsh, on what grounds did you deny Mr. Reynolds boarding to first class?" There were irregularities with his corporate account that needed verification." "What irregularities specifically?" "The account code didn't match our standard vendor list. I'm looking at that account right now. HC 4187 Horizon Investment Group. It's been active with your airline for 5 years. Hundreds of transactions. Perfect payment history. What made you flag this specific transaction?" Silence. "Ms. Walsh, I'm waiting. I made a judgment call based on observable factors such as his appearance, his responses to my questions, the overall context." His appearance. "You mean the fact that he's a black man in casual clothes?" "I didn't. That wasn't Ms. Walsh. I'm recommending an investigation into this incident for potential violation of federal anti-discrimination regulations in air travel. You've denied boarding to a passenger with valid documents based on what appears to be racial profiling. Robert, I want a full incident report within 24 hours. Ms. Walsh, you're grounded pending investigation." Catherine's world collapsed in that moment. 15 years of her career gone. "Sir, I was following my training. If your training taught you to profile black passengers, then your training is the problem, and that's something the FAA needs to investigate as well. Now let Mr. Reynolds board his flight." She handed the phone back to Robert, tears starting to form in her eyes. James took his own phone off speaker. "Laura, Richard, thank you for responding. I'll let you know if there are any other issues." He paused. "And Laura, when I get to San Francisco, we need to talk about safety culture. But that's a separate conversation." He hung up and looked at Catherine. Her face was ashen tears threatening to spill. He felt no satisfaction in this moment, only weariness and a bone-deep frustration that it had come to this, that he'd had to use his position, his connections, his power just to access a seat he'd paid for. "I didn't want this," he said quietly, only to her. "I wanted you to treat me the way you treated everyone else. That's all. Just basic human dignity." He walked past her into the jet bridge. Robert turned to Catherine, his voice low and hard. "Conference room, now. After this flight departs, we're going to have a very serious conversation about what just happened and why you no longer have a job with this airline. Mr. Cooper, please. You denied boarding to a board member. You racially profiled a passenger. You created a PR nightmare with 50 witnesses and video evidence. There is no scenario where you keep your job. The only question is whether you face federal charges." He turned to the crowd of passengers still waiting to board, many with their phones out. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. Boarding will continue now." Inside the aircraft, James made his way to seat 2A window seat, second row, exactly what he'd paid for. He stowed his backpack in the overhead bin and sat down. Michael Bennett sat across the aisle in 2C. He looked shaken. I'm so sorry." That was completely out of line. "Are you okay?" James managed a tired smile. "I'm all right. Thank you for asking. I should have said something. At the gate when she was questioning you. I saw what was happening. I knew it was wrong and I just walked past. I told myself it wasn't my business. Michael met his eyes. Now I understand that silence makes me complicit. Next time, and there will be a next time somewhere, somehow I won't be silent. I promise you that. James nodded. Good. Hold yourself to that promise. Boarding continued. The cabin filled slowly, passengers whispering among themselves about what they just witnessed. Some looked at James with sympathy, others with curiosity, a few with what might have been newfound respect. The last passengers filed in. The door closed with a heavy thunk. The captain's voice came over the PA. Flight attendants prepare for departure. But James could see Daniela at the forward galley, tears in her eyes, looking at where Catherine should have been. Could sense the tension in the cabin, could feel that something more was wrong beyond just the discrimination he'd faced. This wasn't over. The worst was still to come. But he'd made it onto the plane. Number 44 had escalated in a way the previous 43 incidents never had. He'd been forced to use his power, his position, his connections, just to access a service he'd paid for. And that realization sat heavy in his chest as the aircraft began to push back from the gate. The cabin settled into pre-flight routines. Daniela, now the acting lead flight attendant, began her announcements with a voice that betrayed no hint of the drama that had preceded boarding. Professional warm practiced the voice of commercial aviation that millions of passengers heard every day. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Sky Blue Airlines flight SK2801 with service to San Francisco. We're expecting a flight time of 5 hours and 17 minutes. The captain has informed us that we're expecting smooth conditions for most of our journey today. James half listened to the familiar script, his mind elsewhere. He reviewed what had just happened, analyzing it as he would any business scenario. Catherine Walsh had been trained perhaps not explicitly, but certainly implicitly to make assumptions based on appearance. When those assumptions were challenged, she doubled down rather than reconsidering. The system had rewarded her for this behavior until today, until she'd applied it to the wrong person. That was the uncomfortable truth that gnawed at him. If he hadn't been a board member with direct lines to executives and regulators, how would this have played out? He would have been forced to accept alternative accommodations or leave the aircraft entirely. There would have been no consequences for Catherine, no accountability for discriminatory practices. The realization weighed on him like a physical burden. This was precisely why he'd started the ground truth auditing program, to experience the airline as ordinary passengers did without the protective shield of status and connections. But now he'd been forced to reveal himself to use his privilege to gain access to a seat he'd already paid for. The irony wasn't lost on him. Across the aisle, Michael Bennett was unusually quiet. The investment banker, who typically spent pre-flight moments on his phone, was instead staring straight ahead, lost in thought. James could almost see the mental recalibration happening, a privileged man confronting a reality he'd previously been able to ignore. "Anything I can get you before takeoff?" "Sir?" Daniela asked James. Her smile professional, but her eyes conveying something more, perhaps solidarity, perhaps apology. "Just water, please." "Of course." She poured water into a proper glass, placed it on his tray with a cocktail napkin, then hesitated. "Sir, I'm so sorry about what happened at the gate. It wasn't your fault. I should have spoken up more forcefully. Sometimes the system makes that very difficult to do." She nodded, understanding exactly what he meant, then moved on to the next passenger. The cabin filled. Daniela began pre-flight beverage service, moving efficiently through the first-class cabin. Row 1. Good morning. Sparkling water or orange juice. Warm, genuine smile. Row 2. Michael Bennett. Your usual, Mr. Bennett. Friendly familiar. Row 2. James. Sir. Can I refresh your water? Professional, no different than anyone else. That was all he'd wanted. Equal treatment, equal dignity. The same professional courtesy extended to every other passenger. The door closed, engines powered up. The plane began pushing back. Daniela and the other flight attendants conducted final safety checks, moving through the cabin with practiced efficiency. They checked seatbelts, confirmed tray tables were up, verified carry-on items were properly stowed. When Daniela reached the emergency exit by James's row exit door, 2L, she paused, checking the door seal, the handle, the control panel. Then she noticed something. The status indicator was blinking. Red, orange, green. Red, orange, green. Natalie, she called to her colleague. Exit door 2L has a warning light. Natalie Garcia, a 40-year-old flight attendant with 12 years of experience, came over. She looked at the blinking light with a frown. Probably a sensor glitch. Reset it. Daniela pressed the reset button. The light went solid green for 3 seconds, then started blinking again. It's still doing it. We should report this to the captain. Daniela, if we reported every sensor glitch, we'd never take off. The maintenance logs show this aircraft passed inspection this morning. Just reset it again. Daniela reset it. This time it stayed green. See fixed. James, sitting 2 feet away, had heard everything. He looked up. Excuse me, is there a problem with the door? Natalie turned cold. No, sir. Everything is fine. I heard about a warning light. It's been resolved. Was it reported to the captain? That's not necessary. James pulled out his phone and typed, Exit door 2L warning light malfunction. Red-orange-green pattern reset twice. Flight attendant N. Garcia refused to report. Flight SK2801, 8:05 a.m. Natalie saw him typing. Sir, your phone needs to be in airplane mode. I'm documenting a safety concern. Put it away now. In a moment. He finished, saved, switched to airplane mode. Done. Natalie stared with barely concealed anger, then walked away. Daniela stood there, caught between concern and authority. James spoke quietly. You tried to do the right thing. Thank you. Daniela's eyes filled with tears. I should have insisted. It's not your fault. Remember this feeling. Don't let it happen again. The aircraft taxied toward the runway. 4 planes ahead. James watched through the window. He had a choice. Let it go one warning light. Probably nothing, or escalate, causing massive disruption but potentially preventing disaster. His pulse quickened slightly. His mouth went dry. He felt the familiar weight of a high-stakes decision, the kind he'd made hundreds of times in business, but never with 180 lives potentially in the balance. Time seemed to slow as the aircraft moved forward in the queue. 3 planes ahead. The blinking light pattern flashed through his mind. Red, orange, green. Was it really just a sensor glitch? Maybe. Probably even. But what if it wasn't? What if it indicated a more serious issue with the door's locking mechanism or pressure seal? What if the aircraft experienced rapid decompression at altitude 2 planes ahead now? James's hand drifted toward his phone. He thought about the 44 times he'd stayed silent, about how silence enables broken systems, about having power and the responsibility to use it. He thought about discrimination, creating blind spots, about Natalie dismissing his concern because she'd already decided he wasn't credible. He thought about the 180 people on this plane. Someone's child, someone's parent, someone's spouse. Lives entrusted to a system that had just demonstrated it was willing to ignore protocols when convenient, to dismiss certain voices as unworthy of attention. 1 plane ahead. The decision crystallized in his mind with sudden clarity. When someone decides you don't belong in a space, they also decide your voice doesn't matter. Your concerns aren't valid. Your observations aren't credible. And in an industry where safety depends on hearing every concern that creates dangerous blind spots, If you've ever had to choose between staying silent and causing a scene, let us know in the comments. Would you have made the call? James is about to make. James made his decision. He took his phone off airplane mode. Natalie saw it immediately. "Sir, your phone. I'm making a phone call. You cannot. This is an emergency." James stood up, hand raised in a firm stop gesture. "Do not touch me. Step back." His voice wasn't loud, but it had authority. Several passengers turned. The phone connected. "James, is everything all right?" James spoke clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Laura, I need you to conference in Richard Moore at the FAA immediately. We have a critical safety situation on flight SK2801. Natalie froze. "Laura, FAA." Every eye in first class turned to James. Michael Bennett's mouth opened. Natalie looked like she might faint. The machine had just broken, and everything was about to change. Laura Taylor's voice came through the phone, crisp and professional, but edged with concern. "Talk to me. What's the situation?" James spoke clearly, his voice carrying through the first-class cabin where every passenger had stopped to listen. Every conversation ceased. Every phone lowered. This was the only thing happening now. "I'm on aircraft, November 7801. Currently taxiing for departure at Hartsfield-Jackson. Exit door 2L has a malfunctioning status indicator. The warning light has been cycling red, orange, green, indicating a potential seal or lock failure. Flight crew observed this issue, reset it twice, and deliberately chose not to report it to the captain." He paused, connecting dots. "Laura, I reviewed maintenance logs this morning. This aircraft underwent scheduled maintenance 48 hours ago. Work order included door mechanisms. Given this malfunction is occurring immediately after that maintenance, there's a reasonable possibility this is an installation error, not a sensor glitch. If it's procedural, then every aircraft from that maintenance cycle could have similar problems." His voice intensified. "This isn't just about one aircraft. We need to assume worst case. We need FAA involvement. We need inspections before any more of these aircraft fly." Silence then. Laura's voice tight. "James, you're saying we need to ground the entire 787 fleet at Atlanta?" "Yes, until we know the scope. We have a confirmed malfunction crew. Failure to report per protocol and maintenance history suggesting this could be structural. If we don't act now, we could be looking at catastrophic failure." Jesus. "Okay, hold on. I'm patching in Richard Moore." Clicking sounds. A new voice joined, deep and authoritative. "This is Richard Moore, FAA Regional Administrator." "Laura." "Richard, this is Laura Taylor, Executive VP at Sky Blue. I have James Reynolds on the line reporting a critical safety issue. James Reynolds, the board member?" "Yes." "Put him on." James spoke with absolute clarity. "Mr. Moore, this is James Reynolds, passenger on Sky Blue Flight 2801 aircraft, November 7801, Boeing 787, currently taxiing at Hartsfield-Jackson. I'm reporting a critical safety protocol violation. Exit door 2L displayed warning light malfunction indicating potential seal or locking mechanism failure. Flight crew observed it reset it twice, deliberately didn't report to captain despite protocol." He continued without pause. "This aircraft had maintenance 48 hours ago, including door mechanisms. If this malfunction relates to that maintenance, we could have multiple aircraft with compromised exit integrity. I'm requesting immediate action. Ground this aircraft. Inspect all Sky Blue 787s at Atlanta before flight. This could be structural across the fleet." Silence typing in the background, then Moore's voice sharp. "You're certain about the malfunction? Certain enough to make this call knowing the consequences?" Moore decided instantly, issuing immediate ground stop for all Sky Blue 787s at Hartsfield-Jackson. "Laura, how many aircraft? 11 at gates 2 on approach 1 taxiing, 14 total. Ground them all immediately. No Sky Blue 787 departures until my inspectors clear them. Laura, get your maintenance chief on site within the hour. This is a formal FAA investigation. If we find deliberate safety violations, there will be consequences. Understood. Mr. Reynolds, thank you for this call. If you're right, you just saved lives. I hope I'm wrong, Mr. Moore. But that's the right call. The line clicked off. James sat down. First class was silent, every passenger staring. Michael Bennett's mouth hung open. Natalie looked like she might faint, her face, gray hands trembling. James looked at her calmly. I did what you should have done. I put safety first. 23 seconds later, the cockpit radio crackled. Sky Blue 2801. This is Atlanta Tower. Stop taxi immediately. Do not proceed to runway. Return to gate. FAA ground stop order. Acknowledge. Captain Anderson confused tower confirm. We're cleared for takeoff. Negative. Ground stop issued by FAA Regional Administrator. All Sky Blue 787s grounded. Return to gate for emergency inspection. Acknowledge. Anderson hit the brakes. Copy. Returning to gate. Advise nature of ground stop. Safety inspection ordered by FAA. Contact ops for gate assignment. Anderson flipped to cabin intercom. Flight attendants returning to gate under ATC instructions. Then to crew intercom voice hard. Natalie. What the hell happened? We just got grounded by the FAA. Natalie's voice barely a whisper. Captain, a passenger reported a safety issue with exit door 2L. You had a warning light on an exit and didn't tell me. Silence. Did you or did you not have a warning light? Yes, Captain, but I determined, Jesus Christ. We'll deal with this on the ground. Secure the cabin. The aircraft slowly turned, heading back to the terminal. Passengers murmured in confusion. Phones came out despite the prohibition on electronic devices. This was news now. The extraordinary rarely happens in commercial aviation, which runs on routine and protocol. But something extraordinary was happening. Through the window, James could see emergency vehicles approaching, their lights flashing. Not because there was an immediate danger, but because protocol demanded their presence for any aircraft returning under an FAA order. Daniela secured the cabin professionally, but her hands shook slightly. She avoided looking at Natalie, who stood frozen in the galley, the implications of what had just happened washing over her in waves. Michael Bennett leaned across the aisle. What exactly is happening? His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, as if speaking normally might trigger some additional catastrophe. The exit door next to us has a malfunctioning indicator light. It could be nothing a sensor glitch, but it could also indicate a problem with the door's locking mechanism or pressure seal. If that's the case, and if the aircraft experienced rapid decompression at altitude, the door might not function properly. And that's bad. That's potentially catastrophic. In an emergency, if passengers couldn't exit. James left the rest unsaid. The implication was clear enough. Michael paled. And you think this could affect other planes if it's related to recent maintenance work? Yes. Same procedures, same technicians, same parts problems tend to cluster. That's why the FAA is grounding the entire fleet until they can check. All because you made a phone call. Michael shook his head, not in disapproval, but in dawning understanding. If Catherine hadn't tried to keep you off the plane, if you hadn't been here, someone else might have noticed. Daniela tried to report it, but Natalie shut her down. Just like Catherine tried to shut you down. James nodded. When you decide someone doesn't belong, you also decide their voice doesn't matter. Their concerns aren't valid. Their observations aren't credible. It creates a door that locks people out of being heard, and in safety-critical industries, that door can be deadly. The plane docked at gate D23, the same gate where Catherine had tried to deny James boarding less than 30 minutes earlier. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone in first class. The seatbelt sign dinged off. The captain's voice came over the PA. Ladies and gentlemen, we've returned to the gate due to a potential safety concern with one of our exit doors. FAA inspectors will be coming aboard to assess the situation. We ask for your patience. We'll provide more information as soon as we have it." Passengers began to stir, gathering belongings, checking phones. News travels fast in the social media age. Several were already reading reports of a ground stop at Atlanta. The aircraft door opened. Through it came Robert Cooper, 3 maintenance technicians with diagnostic equipment, 2 FAA inspectors in official jackets, and Laura Taylor, executive vice president, in an impeccable black suit. She walked directly to James. "Mr. Reynolds, are you all right?" Every head turned. The EVP knows him. "I'm fine, Laura. Thank you for responding. We're inspecting the door now." Maintenance moved to door 2L. Lead technician Diego Martinez opened the control panel, connected a diagnostic tablet, ran tests, while colleagues examined the physical mechanism. Running full diagnostic. Intermittent sensor failure. Checking physical mechanism. Actuator response slow. Hydraulic pressure borderline low. 2 minutes 5. Diego straightened, face grave. "Ma'am, we have a serious problem. Talk to me. Sensor failure is real. Frayed connection cable from installation damage during last maintenance. But worse, the hydraulic actuator shows premature wear. Combined with low pressure, there's significant risk. This door would fail to open under depressurization at altitude." Define significant. Diego showed his tablet. Approximately 65% failure probability in emergency depressurization. The words landed like a bomb. Robert, 65%. Yes. And given recent maintenance, other aircraft from that cycle could have similar problems. FAA Inspector Lisa Gonzalez stepped forward. "How many aircraft in that maintenance cycle?" Laura's voice was hollow. 8 over 3 days. Our full fleet is 24. Lisa pulled her radio. "This is Inspector Gonzalez. Confirmed safety violation. Emergency exit door with 65% failure rate. Recommend expansion of ground stop to all Sky Blue 787s nationwide." Passengers who'd been annoyed sat stunned. 65%, 6 out of 10 times trapped. Michael Bennett looked ill. "You knew it was serious." James shook his head. "I suspected. When something feels wrong, it usually is." Laura approached. "You may have saved hundreds of lives." She addressed the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Laura Taylor, Executive Vice President. First, I apologize for this disruption. We've discovered a serious safety defect thanks to the vigilance of one passenger." She gestured to James. "The FAA has ordered inspections of all our 787s. This means delays and cancellations. We'll rebook everyone with full refunds plus compensation, but you are safe." The system worked. A woman in row 4. If we'd taken off, Laura was direct. There was 65% probability an emergency exit wouldn't function properly in certain conditions. Shocked silence. "How did you find out?" Laura glanced at James. "One of our passengers identified the issue and reported it properly." Every eye turned to James. "Thank you," a woman said. "You saved us," others echoed. "Thank you. You saved our lives." James nodded, no satisfaction, only relief and weariness at how close they'd come. Elena Rodriguez, still in the gate area, had watched everything. She'd been taking notes on her phone, detailed observations of discrimination that nearly caused disaster. This story needed to be told. The whole story. Natalie sat in a corner, face in hands, crying. She'd realized her decisions that morning could have killed 180 people. Daniela sat nearby, also crying, but for different reasons. Guilt for not pushing harder. Michael Bennett sat quietly thinking about his silence at the gate, about how he'd walked past and said nothing about how that silence was part of the system that nearly killed them all. The machine had broken. The truth was revealed. "What do you mean, all 787s? All of them? That's impossible." The shout came from a harried gate agent at D-17, her phone pressed to her ear. "We have 3 full flights leaving in the next hour. Across Terminal D, similar scenes played out as the FAA ground stop order rippled through the airport. Gate agents received frantic calls from operations. Flight crews stared at their phones in disbelief. Passengers initially unaware continued their pre-flight routines until the announcements began. Ladies and gentlemen, we regret to inform you that Sky Blue Flight 1422 to Seattle has been delayed due to a mandatory FAA inspection. We don't have an estimated departure time at this moment. We'll provide more information as soon as it becomes available. Attention passengers for Sky Blue Flight 776 to Chicago. Due to an FAA directive, this flight has been canceled. Please proceed to the customer service desk for rebooking options. Within 20 minutes of James's phone call, 14 Sky Blue aircraft at Hartsfield-Jackson were immobilized. 2 that had been on final approach were diverted to secondary gates and immediately taken out of service. The ripple effects spread quickly. Gates that should have been vacated remained occupied, preventing arriving flights from docking. Departure slots were missed. The intricate choreography of one of the world's busiest airports began to falter. In the operations control center 2 floors below the terminal, Robert Cooper's phone erupted. His radio crackled with calls. Computer screens cascaded with alerts. James Wilson, Chief of Customer Service, stared at the chaos. "What's happening?" "FAA ground stop. All our 787s. 14 aircraft." "How long could be hours?" James watched the departure board update in real time. On time. Delayed. Canceled. "This is going to cascade," he whispered. "This is going to shut down Terminal D." By 8:17 a.m., the impact spread beyond Sky Blue. The ground stop of 14 aircraft at 14 gates created a bottleneck. Other airlines couldn't access gates, the entire terminal slowing like a body experiencing the first symptoms of paralysis. 14. Sky Blue 787s grounded 32 additional flights delayed due to gate blockage. 46 total flights affected, 7. 250 passengers impacted. The PA system carried the news to anxious travelers. Due to an FAA safety inspection, all Sky Blue departures from Terminal D are temporarily delayed. Customer service counters were overwhelmed. Lines stretched 70 people deep. "When will my flight leave? I have a connection in 2 hours." Why is this happening? Agents could only repeat. "We're waiting for updates." Social media erupted the digital nervous system of the modern world, transmitting news faster than official channels could contain it. Twitter, 8:19 a.m. Stuck at ATL. Flight canceled along with 40 others. No explanation. WTF is going on? Reddit, 8:28 a.m. Breaking FAA grounded entire Sky Blue 787 fleet at ATL. Rumor is serious safety issue with exit doors. Comments flooded in exit doors that could kill everyone. My friend is stuck there. They won't explain what happened. CNN filming holiday travel segments pivoted immediately. At 8:33 a.m., they went live. Extraordinary situation developing at Hartsfield-Jackson. FAA has issued emergency ground stop affecting Sky Blue Airlines. Terminal D operations severely disrupted. Widespread cancellations. By 8:45, every local station covered at unprecedented FAA action. Safety concerns. Ground major airline. Thousands stranded. Back at Gate D23, the investigation intensified. The aircraft that had nearly departed with James aboard had become ground zero for what was rapidly expanding into a major aviation incident. On the aircraft, Diego Martinez and his team continued their inspection of the exit door, their tools spread across 2 rows of seats. Passengers had been deplaned, leaving the technicians to work uninterrupted. Their findings grew more alarming with each test. Hydraulic pressure at 62% of spec. Actuator showing signs of accelerated wear. Primary seal compression uneven. Multiple failure points. FAA. Inspector Lisa Gonzalez documented everything, her expression growing increasingly grave. Maintenance history. Diego pulled up the records on his tablet. C-check completed 48 hours ago. Door mechanisms serviced by Team Charlie, second shift. 8 aircraft total over 3 days. Same crew, same supervisor, rotating technicians. Laura Taylor watched the inspection, her mind racing through scenarios, contingency plans, and the inevitable PR disaster that was unfolding. As EVP, she was responsible for both operations and communications. Both were in crisis. "We need to expand the ground stop," she said finally. "If this is happening on all 8 aircraft from that maintenance cycle, we can't risk it." Lisa nodded grimly. "I'm already recommending nationwide grounding of all Sky Blue 787s. That's 24 aircraft total. Do it." At 9:02 a.m., the FAA officially expanded the ground stop to all Sky Blue 787s nationwide. Planes at gates were held. Planes in the air would be inspected immediately upon landing. No Sky Blue 787 would depart until thoroughly checked and cleared by FAA inspectors. The economic impact was immediate and severe. Estimated cost to Sky Blue, $3.8 million in direct expenses. Passenger compensation required approximately $850,000. Rescheduling costs, $1.2 million. Lost revenue, $1.75 million. But those were just numbers on a spreadsheet. The human cost was playing out in terminals across the country. Missed connections, canceled vacations, delayed business meetings, separated families. Think about a time when a flight delay changed your plans. Now imagine it was caused by someone trying to stop a catastrophe. Would you be angry or grateful? Share your thoughts in the comments. In the terminal, Elena Rodriguez had become an unlikely center of attention. Several passengers who had witnessed the boarding incident with James had approached her, sharing their own experiences with discrimination on flights. Her teacher's instinct for listening, for creating space for people to share their stories, made her a natural confidant. "I saw what happened," one man said. "I fly every week and I see that kind of thing all the time, but nobody ever calls it out. I've been questioned about my first-class ticket more times than I can count," a black woman in a business suit told her. "Even though I'm executive platinum status." Elena listened, nodding. "It's important to document these patterns," she said. "That's how change happens. One story can be dismissed. Hundreds of stories become evidence." Near the customer service desk, Michael Bennett stood in silence, watching the chaos unfold. As a frequent premium passenger, he'd never experienced the frustration now visible on hundreds of faces. He'd always been insulated, his status ensuring priority, rebooking his wealth, allowing him to simply book another flight if needed, his privilege meaning no one ever questioned his right to be where he was. Now he was witnessing the consequence of systems that treated people differently, based on appearance, that silenced certain voices, that created hierarchies of credibility where some concerns were taken seriously and others dismissed. And he'd been complicit in it. He'd walked past James being questioned without saying a word. He'd told himself it wasn't his business, wasn't his problem. He'd been wrong, and that wrongness had almost cost him his life, along with 179 other people. In a small conference room near Gate D23, a crisis team assembled. Present were Laura Taylor, Robert Cooper, Lisa Gonzalez, Diego Martinez, and via video conference, Richard Moore from the FAA and William Hayes, Sky Blue CEO, calling in from company headquarters in Dallas. "Give me the latest." Hayes demanded, his face tight with stress on the video screen. Laura summarized the situation clinically. Exit door 2L on aircraft N7801 showed warning light malfunction during taxi. Inspection revealed multiple issues. Frayed sensor connection, hydraulic pressure at 62% of spec actuator showing accelerated wear, uneven seal compression. Estimated failure probability in emergency conditions, 65%. "How did this happen?" Hayes asked. Diego Martinez consulted his tablet. "Preliminary finding indicates improper installation during recent maintenance. The C-check was performed by second shift crew Team Charlie, supervised by Mark Wilson. They serviced 8 aircraft over a 3-day period, and the failure to report the warning light, Laura's voice hardened. Lead flight attendant Catherine Walsh was removed from the flight earlier due to a separate incident. Junior flight attendant Daniela Morales noticed the warning light and attempted to report it. Senior flight attendant Natalie Garcia overrode her and instructed her to reset without reporting to the captain. Jesus Christ, Hayes muttered. So we've got maintenance issues and procedural violations. Yes, and there's more. Laura hesitated, then continued. The passenger who reported the door issue, James Reynolds, he's a board member conducting ground truth auditing. He was initially denied boarding by Catherine Walsh in what appears to be a clear case of racial profiling. He was explicitly denied his first-class seat, despite having valid documentation. The situations are connected. Walsh's discrimination against Reynolds could have prevented him from being on that aircraft. Garcia's dismissal of his safety concern mirrors the earlier dismissal of his right to be there. Hayes closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the magnitude of the crisis. When he opened them, his expression was resolute. Full transparency. No cover-up. We own this completely. Laura. I want you to personally oversee the response. Robert work with operations on passenger accommodation. Richard will cooperate fully with any FAA investigation. Richard Moore nodded. We're expanding the investigation to include anti-discrimination compliance as well as safety protocols. This incident highlights how they're interconnected. Agreed, Hayes said. We need to address both simultaneously. The discrimination is as serious as the maintenance issues. Both put lives at risk. What about the press? Laura asked. They're already swarming the terminal. Tell them the truth. We discovered a safety issue. We're addressing it. We're cooperating with the FAA. Safety is our absolute priority. And the discrimination aspect, Hayes didn't hesitate. That too. We don't hide from our failures. We learn from them. As the meeting continued, James Reynolds sat alone in a quiet corner of the sky-blue first-class lounge. He'd been escorted there by Laura's assistant, given privacy and space to decompress. He'd made several calls to his office, rescheduling his meetings in San Francisco to his family, assuring them he was fine, to his assistant, giving instructions about documents he would need for the inevitable meetings to come. He felt no triumph, no vindication, only a profound weariness mixed with relief. The system had nearly failed catastrophically today. It had taken extraordinary measures to prevent disaster measures that shouldn't have been necessary. James thought about Catherine Walsh and Natalie Garcia. He felt no personal animosity toward either woman. They were products of a culture that rewarded certain behaviors that created incentives for certain kinds of judgment. They'd been taught explicitly or implicitly that appearance determined credibility, that maintaining standards meant enforcing hierarchies, that questioning certain passengers was prudent, while questioning others was risky. The door to the lounge opened. Michael Bennett entered, looking somewhat out of place despite his expensive suit and obvious status markers. He approached James hesitantly. Mind if I join you? James gestured to the empty chair. Please. Michael sat his posture stiff, uncomfortable. I've been thinking about what happened, about my role in it. I noticed. I've flown over 2 million miles, first class, business class, private jets. I've never once been questioned about belonging there, never had my boarding pass examined twice, never been asked for employment verification. Michael met James's eyes directly. I always thought that was normal, just how things worked. For some people it is normal, but not for you. No, not for me, not for many others. Michael nodded slowly. When I saw Catherine questioning you, I knew something was wrong. I felt uncomfortable, but I told myself it wasn't my business. I told myself it was between you and her. I told myself someone else would say something if it was really a problem. That's a common response. It's a cowardly response. Michael's voice had an edge of self-recrimination. I didn't want to get involved. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to risk my own comfort, and because of that I nearly died today. We all nearly died. You understand the connection. I think I'm starting to. Michael looked around the quiet lounge at the expensive furnishings, the complimentary food and drink, the markers of privilege and status. All of this, the lounges, the priority boarding the champagne, it creates an illusion that we're safer, more valuable. But an aircraft doesn't care what class you're sitting in when a door fails at 35,000 feet. James smiled slightly. That's a profound realization. What happens now? With the airline, I mean. That depends on how the leadership responds. This is a clarifying moment, the kind that reveals character and priorities. James checked his watch. I expect we'll know very soon. Outside in the terminal, the initial chaos was giving way to organized response. Customer service representatives had been called in from off-duty. Additional staff from other terminals had been redirected to Terminal D. The first wave of rebookings was underway. The ground stop had exposed weaknesses in SkyBlue's contingency planning, but now the company's emergency protocols were engaging. Stranded passengers were being offered hotel vouchers. Alternative transportation was being arranged for those who couldn't wait for rebooked flights. Food vouchers were distributed. But the most significant changes were happening behind the scenes in maintenance hangars and operations centers where every SkyBlue 787 was now being subjected to rigorous inspection. At 10:30 a.m., the first results from other aircraft came in. 3 more planes from the same maintenance cycle showed similar door issues. The pattern was confirmed. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a maintenance procedure failure that had affected multiple aircraft. By 11:00 a.m., the full scope was clear. SkyBlue's entire 787 fleet, 24 aircraft nationwide grounded FAA inspectors dispatched to 5 cities. At Hartsfield, Jackson, 46 flights canceled or severely delayed. 250 passengers, affected Terminal D at 40% capacity. Economic impact, $3.8 million for the day. Inspection completion estimate, 36 to 48 hours. The story went national. Every outlet covered it. Aviation experts appeared on CNN. This is the safety system working. A passenger identified a problem, reported it. FAA responded immediately. Yes, disruptive, but if one aircraft had failed catastrophically, the cost in lives would be immeasurable. Social media debate raged. This passenger is a hero. He shut down an airport over one warning light. Overreaction. Read between the lines. Black passenger discriminated against. Then his safety concern dismissed because of that discrimination. Bias creates danger. Are flying while black trended. Stories poured in about being questioned about first-class tickets, having concerns dismissed. The narrative shifted from airline safety issue to discrimination nearly caused disaster. By 1:00 p.m., SkyBlue stock dropped 8%. Customer service was overwhelmed. William Hayes called an emergency board meeting. James participated from a private room in Terminal D. The crisis had only just begun, but the system broken and exposed would never be the same. In the hours following James Reynolds' phone call, the ripple effects spread far beyond the boundaries of Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. What had begun as one incident of discrimination followed by one safety observation had escalated into a full-blown crisis affecting thousands of passengers, hundreds of employees, and an entire industry's reputation. Laura Taylor stood at the center of the emergency response, coordinating teams across multiple fronts. The logistical challenge was immense, rerouting passengers, arranging hotel accommodations, fielding press inquiries, managing the inspection of 24 aircraft across 5 cities. But the larger challenge was strategic: how to transform a potential disaster into an opportunity for meaningful change. At 2:00 p.m., a crisis meeting convened in a private conference room near Terminal D. Present were Laura Taylor, Richard Moore from the FAA, Robert Cooper, Lisa Gonzalez, and Diego Martinez. William Hayes joined via secure video link from Dallas headquarters. First update on the fleet inspection, Diego reported. 5 of the 8 aircraft from the recent maintenance cycle have confirmed door issues. Same pattern on all of them: frayed connection cables, hydraulic actuator wear, seal compression problems. Catastrophic failure risk, Richard Moore asked. Between 50 and 65% in depressurization scenarios. Moore's expression hardened. So we've confirmed a maintenance pattern failure. This justifies the nationwide ground stop. William Hayes nodded grimly. What's the timeline for getting aircraft back in service? Aircraft not affected by the maintenance issue can be cleared within 24 hours if they pass inspection, Lisa said. The affected aircraft will require parts replacement and recertification. That's at least 72 hours, possibly longer. Customer impact, Hayes asked. Laura consulted her tablet. Current estimate 32,000 passengers affected over the next 48 hours. We're rebooking on partner airlines where possible, providing hotel vouchers where necessary, and offering full refunds plus compensation vouchers to all affected passengers. PR situation mixed. We're getting credit for transparency and quick action on the safety front. On the discrimination issue, it's more complex. Catherine Walsh has become the face of the problem. Social media has unearthed several previous complaints against her. There's growing pressure for a broader investigation of discriminatory practices. Hayes nodded. As there should be. This wasn't just a one-off incident. If one flight attendant felt empowered to openly discriminate and another felt comfortable ignoring safety protocols from a black passenger, we've got deeper cultural issues to address. We need a unified response, Laura agreed. One that addresses both the safety and discrimination aspects. They're connected, as this incident demonstrates clearly. I want a press conference at 3 Cesaro, Hayes decided. Full transparency on both issues. No deflection, no excuses. We acknowledge the problems, outline our immediate actions, and commit to meaningful change. Meanwhile, in the terminal, Elena Rodriguez had become an unexpected rallying point. The retired teacher who had spoken out during James's boarding confrontation now found herself at the center of an impromptu community gathering in the gate area. Passengers from Flight SK-2801, stranded travelers from other canceled flights, and even off-duty airline employees had formed a circle around her as she facilitated a remarkable conversation. It's not just about this one incident, a black business traveler was saying. It's about the 1,000 little indignities we face every time we fly. Being questioned about our tickets, getting extra scrutiny at security, having our complaints dismissed. And it's not just airlines, added a young Hispanic woman in a sky blue uniform speaking quietly. It's hotels, restaurants, stores. Anywhere there's a hierarchy of service. If you don't look the part, you're treated as less deserving. Elena nodded. What we're talking about goes beyond customer service. It's about who gets heard and who gets ignored. Today we saw how dangerous that can be. Michael Bennett, who had been standing at the edge of the circle, finally spoke up. I'm part of the problem, he admitted. I saw what was happening to Mr. Reynolds at the gate, and I just walked past. I told myself it wasn't my business. All eyes turned to him, the wealthy white executive in his perfect suit admitting complicity. I fly first class every week, he continued. No one has ever questioned my right to be there. No one has ever examined my boarding pass twice. When I make a request or raise a concern, it's taken seriously immediately. He paused. Today I realized that's not everyone's experience, and I realized that my silence makes me complicit. Elena smiled gently. Recognition is the first step toward change. Across the terminal, Daniela Morales sat alone in the crew lounge, replaying the morning's events in her mind. She'd tried to report the door issue to Natalie. She'd been overridden. She should have insisted, should have gone directly to the captain. But she hadn't. She'd deferred to authority, to hierarchy, to the unwritten rules that governed her workplace. The door to the lounge opened and Robert Cooper entered. Ms. Morales, we need your statement for the official investigation. Daniela nodded, wiping away tears. I should have insisted about the door. I knew the protocol report all warning lights to the captain, no exceptions. But Natalie was senior, and I just went along. You're not the one under investigation, Robert assured her, but we need to understand the culture that made this possible. What made you hesitate? What barriers prevented you from following protocol? Daniela thought for a moment. It's not just one thing. It's the whole structure. Seniority matters more than being right. Keeping the schedule matters more than addressing concerns. And some voices carry more weight than others. Tell me about that last part. It's unspoken, but everyone knows it. Complaints from a businessman in a suit get immediate attention. Concerns from other passengers get scrutiny, skepticism, delay. Based on what appearance? Status markers, demographics. Daniela's voice dropped. Race sometimes. Robert nodded grimly. That's what we need to fix. Not just the doors, but the culture that decides whose concerns matter. In the sky blue executive suite, James Reynolds reviewed the draft press statement that Laura had sent over. The airline was taking the right approach, full acknowledgement of both the safety issues and the discrimination, clear commitments to addressing both no excuses or deflection. His phone rang his assistant in New York. James, the board chair, is trying to reach you. Some board members are suggesting you overreacted, that grounding the entire fleet was an excessive response to one warning light. James sighed. Politics already. Tell him I'll join the emergency board call in 30 minutes. And send me the maintenance records for all 787s in the fleet for the past 6 months. I want to be prepared. He hung up, rubbing his temples. This was exactly why he'd started ground truth auditing, to experience the airline without the protective bubble of status and recognition. Today had revealed serious flaws in both safety culture and inclusivity. Some would try to minimize these issues to protect the status quo. He wouldn't let that happen. At precisely 3:00 p.m. Eastern Time, William Hayes stepped before a forest of microphones in Dallas with Laura Taylor beside him in Atlanta via video link. Camera flashes erupted as the CEO began his statement. Today, Sky Blue Airlines experienced a serious safety issue that resulted in the grounding of our entire 787 fleet. FAA inspectors identified a maintenance concern with exit doors on multiple aircraft. This issue was first reported by a passenger on flight SK-2801 at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport this morning. He paused, making direct eye contact with the cameras. That passenger, who is also a Sky Blue board member conducting routine quality assessment, was initially denied boarding due to apparent racial profiling by our staff. The two incidents, the discriminatory treatment and the safety issue, are connected. Had this passenger been successfully prevented from boarding, the door malfunction might not have been detected before takeoff. Hayes outlined the immediate actions being taken: the fleet-wide inspection, revised maintenance protocols, comprehensive review of training programs, and a new anonymous reporting system for both safety concerns and discrimination incidents. These actions are just the beginning, Hayes emphasized. We're cooperating fully with all investigations. We're commissioning an independent audit of our safety and inclusion practices, and we're committed to making whatever changes are necessary to ensure this never happens again. The questions came rapid fire, and Hayes answered each one directly and candidly. No evasions, no corporate speak, no minimizing either the safety issues or the discrimination. By nightfall, the immediate crisis response was in full swing. The first group of unaffected aircraft had passed inspection and would return to service the following morning. Thousands of stranded passengers had been rebooked or accommodated. The media narrative was evolving from outrage to cautious approval of Sky Blue's transparent response. But beneath the logistical challenges, a deeper examination was beginning of corporate culture, of unwritten rules of who gets heard and who gets ignored. What had started with one man being questioned at a gate had exposed fault lines that ran through the entire organization and perhaps the industry as a whole. Have you ever had to stand up against a culture that was trying to silence you? What gave you the courage to speak up? Share your experience below. 3 weeks after flight SK-2801, James Reynolds walked into Sky Blue's corporate headquarters for a special board meeting. The immediate crisis had passed. The fleet was back in service. Passengers had been accommodated. The media cycle had moved on to newer stories. But the real work was just beginning. William Hayes greeted him at the elevator. "Thanks for coming in person, James. The board needs to hear directly from you. How's the mood up there, mixed? Some see this as an opportunity for meaningful change. Others are more focused on limiting liability and moving on." Classic, James said with a tight smile. Damage control versus actual improvement. They entered the boardroom together. 12 board members sat around a polished table. Some James knew well, others barely at all. Laura Taylor was present along with Susan Clark, the SVP of Human Resources, and the newly appointed Chief Safety Officer, Miguel Santos. Board Chair Thomas Miller opened the session. "We're here to discuss the preliminary findings of the independent audit commissioned after the SK-2801 incident and to consider the proposed action plan developed by management." Laura Taylor took the floor. The audit revealed several interconnected issues. First, on the safety front, maintenance procedures were technically compliant, but rushed due to scheduling pressures. Quality checks were perfunctory. The anonymous reporting system existed on paper but was rarely used because employees feared retaliation. She continued, "On the customer experience side, we found an unwritten hierarchy of passenger credibility. Complaints or concerns from certain passengers, typically white, typically visibly affluent, received immediate attention. Others faced scrutiny, skepticism, or dismissal. Most troubling, Laura concluded, the audit found these weren't isolated issues, but symptoms of a culture that prioritized schedule over safety and appearance over substance. The same cultural issues that led Catherine Walsh to profile James also led Natalie Garcia to dismiss his safety concern." William Hayes stood next. "Based on these findings, we've developed a comprehensive action plan." He outlined the key elements: maintenance, overhaul, new procedures with triple verification for all safety-critical systems. Maintenance teams restructured to eliminate schedule pressure. Reporting revolution. Anonymous reporting system revamped with direct oversight from the board's safety committee. Explicit protection for whistleblowers. Training transformation. Complete revision of all customer-facing training, with emphasis on eliminating bias and ensuring equal treatment of all passengers. Accountability architecture. New metrics, tracking both safety compliance and equal treatment linked directly to compensation and promotion decisions. Cultural reset. Public commitment to a culture where every voice is heard, every concern is addressed, and every passenger receives equal dignity. This won't be easy, Hayes acknowledged. It requires substantial investment, both financial and cultural, but the alternative is unacceptable. We came within minutes of a potential catastrophe because our system silenced certain voices and ignored certain concerns. The discussion that followed was intense. Some board members questioned the cost. Others worried about legal exposure from admitting past failures. A few suggested a more limited targeted response focused only on the specific issues from SK-2801. James had remained silent, listening carefully. Now he spoke. What happened on SK-2801 wasn't a technical failure. It was a human failure. A failure to listen to certain voices, to treat all passengers with equal respect, to prioritize safety over convenience. If we address only the technical aspects, we'll miss the deeper issue. He continued, his voice measured but forceful. When you decide someone doesn't belong in a space, you also decide their voice doesn't matter. Their concerns aren't valid. Their observations aren't credible. In aviation, that creates dangerous blind spots. Catherine Walsh decided I didn't belong in first class. Natalie Garcia decided my safety concern wasn't worth reporting. The root issue is the same. A skeptical board member interjected, "But we can't completely eliminate human judgment. Flight attendants need to make quick assessments. Maintenance crews need to prioritize issues." True, James agreed. But those judgments should be based on objective factors, not appearance or demographics. When bias influences who gets heard, lives are put at risk. That's not theoretical. We saw it happen. After 3 hours of debate, the board voted 9-4 to approve the full action plan. Implementation would begin immediately with quarterly progress reports to the board. As the meeting concluded, Laura pulled James aside. "There's someone who wants to meet you." She led him to a small conference room where Daniela Morales waited nervously. "Mr. Reynolds," she began, "I wanted to thank you personally. What you did on that flight, not just reporting the door issue, but standing up to Catherine. It changed things for me, too. How so? I've been promoted to lead our new flight attendant training program on inclusive service. We're using the SK-2801 incident as a case study in how bias can create safety risks." James smiled genuinely. "That's exactly the kind of change we need. Not just policies, but people who understand the issues firsthand." Over the following months, Sky Blue's transformation gained momentum. The initial skepticism among employees gave way to cautious support as they saw the company's commitment was genuine, not just a PR exercise. The Reynolds Protocol became the centerpiece of the safety culture overhaul, a set of procedures ensuring that safety concerns could be raised by any passenger or employee, regardless of rank or position, and would receive immediate, unfiltered attention. 6 months after SK-2801, William Hayes addressed the annual Aviation Safety Conference with James Reynolds beside him on stage. "The lesson from Flight SK-2801 is clear," Hayes stated. "When we allow bias to influence who we listen to, we create dangerous blind spots. When we decide certain voices matter less than others, we miss critical information. This isn't just about treating people fairly, though that's essential. It's about creating a genuinely safe operation where every observation is valued, every concern is addressed, and every voice is heard." The industry took notice. Other airlines began implementing their own versions of the Reynolds Protocol. The FAA incorporated the lessons from SK-2801 into its safety oversight guidelines. Aviation industry publications ran features on the connection between inclusive cultures and safety outcomes. Catherine Walsh never returned to aviation. After termination, she underwent a period of reflection and eventually found work in corporate training specializing in helping organizations recognize and address unconscious bias. Natalie Garcia faced FAA penalties, but avoided criminal charges. She now worked as a consultant, using her experience to help others avoid similar mistakes. Michael Bennett kept his promise. 2 months after the incident, he witnessed a flight attendant treating a young black passenger with unwarranted suspicion. He spoke up immediately, calmly but firmly, pointing out the disparate treatment. That small act of allyship multiplied across thousands of similar moments by others who had made similar commitments, contributed to gradual but significant change. Elena Rodriguez started a blog documenting discrimination in travel and transportation. Her teacher's instinct for storytelling and evidence gathering made her an unexpected but effective advocate for change. 1 year after SK-2801, the Aviation Safety Foundation released a study showing a 28% increase in reported safety concerns across airlines that had implemented inclusive reporting systems. The correlation was clear when more voices were heard. More potential issues were identified before they became dangerous. James Reynolds continued his ground truth auditing program, though it had expanded significantly and been adopted by several other airlines. The initiative that had once been viewed with suspicion by many executives was now considered a best practice in the industry. The most meaningful change, however, wasn't captured in statistics or press releases. It was in the thousands of interactions happening daily across airports and aircraft flight attendants, greeting all passengers with equal respect. Maintenance crews reporting even minor concerns, without fear of repercussions. Employees at all levels feeling empowered to speak up when something didn't seem right. What had begun with one man being questioned at a gate had catalyzed transformation that rippled through an entire industry. Not overnight, not completely, but meaningfully. Because sometimes it takes a broken door to show what needs fixing. Has a single event ever changed your perspective on something important? Like and subscribe to hear more stories about moments that transform industries and save lives. 2 years to the day after Flight SK-2801, James Reynolds walked through the gleaming concourse of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. The same early morning light filtered through the massive windows. The same efficient chaos of one of the world's busiest airports surrounded him. But much had changed. James still dressed casually for Flight's polo shirt, jeans, comfortable shoes. He still carried his worn backpack now with both zippers repaired. He still maintained his ground truth auditing program, though it had expanded significantly and been adopted by several other airlines. As he approached gate D23, the same gate where everything had started 2 years earlier, he noticed small but significant differences. The sky blue logo had been redesigned as part of a company-wide rebranding. New digital displays showed real-time flight information maintenance status and safety metrics, part of the transparency initiatives implemented after the incident. Most meaningfully, he watched as a young black woman in casual clothes approached the gate desk with a first-class boarding pass. The agent scanned it, smiled, and directed her to the priority lane without hesitation or extra scrutiny. A Hispanic family with small children received assistance with their boarding process. An elderly man with a cane was offered pre-boarding. These weren't dramatic changes, just people doing their jobs professionally and respectfully. But James knew how much work had gone into making these simple interactions consistent across the system. Mr. Reynolds, the gate agent, greeted him. "Good morning. We're boarding Flight 2801 to San Francisco in about 20 minutes. Would you like to pre-board?" "No, thank you. I'll board with my group." The agent nodded understanding. James Reynolds didn't seek special treatment. He sought equal treatment for everyone. He took a seat in the gate area, reflecting on the transformation Sky Blue had undergone. The immediate safety issues had been addressed quickly: exit doors repaired, maintenance procedures, overhauled inspection regimes strengthened. But the deeper cultural changes had taken longer. The Safety and Inclusion Advisory Board had conducted a comprehensive review examining everything from hiring practices to training programs to performance metrics. Their findings had been sobering but ultimately constructive. Sky Blue had implemented all of their recommendations. Revised training for all customer-facing staff with emphasis on recognizing and eliminating bias. New safety reporting protocols that allowed concerns to bypass the chain of command. Enhanced maintenance oversight with independent verification of critical systems. An anonymous reporting system for both safety and discrimination incidents. Regular public reporting of safety metrics and demographic analysis of passenger complaints. Integration of inclusion metrics into performance evaluations and compensation structures. The Reynolds Protocol had been refined and expanded, becoming an industry standard adopted by multiple airlines. Its core principle that anyone should be able to raise a safety concern and be taken seriously regardless of position or appearance had resonated beyond aviation, influencing policies in healthcare, manufacturing, and other safety-critical industries. Mr. Reynolds. James looked up to see a young man, perhaps 23 or 24, standing tentatively before him. "Yes, I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Marcus Wright. I'm a first-year flight attendant with Sky Blue." James smiled. "Not a bother at all. Please sit down." Marcus sat clearly nervous. "They teach us about you in training now. About Flight SK-2801. About the door and everything else that happened that day. I hope they're teaching the right lessons." "They are." Marcus nodded earnestly. "About how bias can create safety risks. About how everyone's voice matters in a safety culture." He hesitated. "I just wanted to say thank you. I'm the first person in my family to finish college. This job means everything to me. And because of the changes after SK-2801, well, it's a different company than it would have been. How so? My supervisor says things used to be different, that certain voices carried more weight than others, that raising concerns could get you labeled as not a team player. Now, the very first thing they teach us is that safety and dignity come first. Always. No exceptions. James nodded, genuinely moved. That's good to hear. They also taught us about the correlation between inclusive cultures and safety outcomes. That companies where everyone's voice matters have fewer safety incidents, higher reporting rates, better resolution of potential issues before they become dangerous. The data supports that. Marcus stood as his supervisor waved from the gate. I need to help with boarding, but I just wanted you to know what you did. That day it changed things. Not just policies, but people. Thank you. As Marcus walked away, James felt something he rarely experienced, a sense of unalloyed accomplishment. Not about grounding the fleet or exposing safety issues, but about the cultural shift that had followed. The real victory wasn't in the emergency response, but in the quiet daily interactions where people felt empowered to speak up, to be heard, to matter. The boarding announcement came. James joined the line for first class, presented his boarding pass without incident, and made his way to seat 2A. As the aircraft filled, he noticed the careful attention the flight attendants gave to each passenger, the same professional courtesy extended to everyone, regardless of appearance or cabin class. When a flight attendant noticed a yellow caution light on a galley panel, she immediately reported it to the captain. A maintenance technician came aboard, verified it was a minor issue, and properly reset the system. The flight departed 14 minutes late, but the captain explained clearly to all passengers why the delay was necessary. No one complained. James looked out the window as the aircraft climbed through clouds over Atlanta, morning sun breaking through, and he smiled. The system was working. Not perfectly, not everywhere. Discrimination hadn't vanished. Humans still made errors. There was still much work to do. But on this flight, on this day, the crew had done everything right. They'd noticed a potential issue. They'd reported it without hesitation. They'd prioritized safety over schedule. They'd trusted their training. They'd done their jobs the way they were supposed to be done. The aircraft leveled at cruising altitude, and a flight attendant approached with a tablet. Mr. Reynolds. The captain asked me to share something with you. She showed him the screen, a safety reporting dashboard showing data from across the airline. Reported safety concerns had increased by 34% over the past 2 years. Resolved issues before they became serious incidents had increased by 41%. Employee satisfaction with safety culture had improved from 62% positive to 89%. Most telling was a survey question: I feel comfortable reporting safety concerns regardless of my position or background. 2 years ago, only 58% had agreed. Now it was 93%. The flight attendant smiled. The captain thought you'd like to see that. He says it's your legacy. As she walked away, James turned back to the window, watching the landscape unfold beneath him. He thought about Marcus Wright, the young flight attendant whose career was beginning in a company that valued his voice. He thought about the data showing fewer safety incidents, more resolved issues, a stronger culture of speaking up. He thought about that morning 2 years ago, the discrimination at the gate, the warning light on the door, the phone call that grounded the fleet. And he realized that the most important outcome wasn't the avoided disaster, but the thousands of small changes that followed. The doors that had opened for people to speak and be heard. One man had been questioned about belonging in first class. One safety concern had been initially dismissed. One phone call had shut down an airport. And an entire industry had begun to change. Not overnight, not completely, but meaningfully. James Reynolds closed his eyes, finally allowing himself to feel the weight of the journey and the satisfaction of seeing real change. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter for the airline, for the industry, and for how organizations thought about the connection between inclusion and safety. His father's words from long ago echoed in his mind. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to be invisible. Refuse to be silent. Refuse to accept being treated as less than human. Everything else follows from that. Today, 35,000 feet above the ground in a seat he'd once had to fight for. James Reynolds knew his father had been right. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We share powerful stories like this one every week that inspire change and highlight important social issues. Your comments help us understand what resonates with you, so let us know your thoughts below. Has anyone ever underestimated you or dismissed your concerns? How did you handle it? Share your experiences and let's keep this important conversation going. Remember to turn on notifications so you never miss our next video.